Buy 2 pigs, get a Apache slave for free, but Cowboy washed her and revealed her true beauty. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over the dusty town of El Paso. The streets were quiet, the air thick with the dry heat of the desert. Horses clopped along the road, and the smell of leather and wood filled the air. This was a rough place, a town where deals were made in dark corners and where the line between right and wrong was often blurred. It was the kind of place where people did what they needed to survive, no matter the cost. Sam Dalton had lived here most of his life. He was a cowboy, one of those men who spent more time in the saddle than in a bed. His face was rugged, weathered by years of hard labor under the scorching sun. His hands, calloused from gripping reins and handling livestock, were strong but rough. Sam wasn't a bad man, at least not by his own standards, but life in the West didn't always offer the luxury of making choices based on good intentions. In this world, you had to do what you had to do to survive. Sam had been looking to expand his ranch. He needed more livestock to fill the land he had claimed, and pigs were an easy, profitable option. The problem was, good pigs were hard to find, and when Sam came across an unusual offer at the local market, he couldn't pass it up. The sign had read, "Buy 2 pigs, get an Apache slave for free." The offer had raised a few eyebrows in the town, and some of the locals were quick to judge. It wasn't an uncommon thing, unfortunately. The wild frontier was a place where life was cheap, and people were often traded like cattle. Sam had heard about the Apache raids and knew that many of the people captured were forced into slavery. But when it came down to it, the offer was tempting. 2 pigs for the price of one, and a free worker to boot. It seemed like a good deal, one that Sam could hardly pass up. He wasn't proud of it, though. He wasn't one to mistreat others, and the thought of owning a slave weighed heavily on him. But in this part of the world, it wasn't uncommon to find yourself making compromises just to get by. So, after some hesitation, Sam agreed to the deal, thinking that the woman, whoever she was, would at least be useful. Little did he know, his life was about to change in ways he never expected. When Sam arrived at the market, he was led to a small, makeshift pen at the back. There, sitting on the ground, was a woman, young, perhaps in her 20s, with dark, braided hair and a worn, exhausted expression on her face. She wore ragged clothes, stained with dirt and sweat. Her hands were tied in front of her, and she looked up at Sam with a mixture of fear and resignation. She wasn't much to look at, not with the dirt covering her face, her skin pale from a lack of proper care. The man who had made the offer, a grizzled old settler, stood beside her, grinning like he'd just struck the deal of a lifetime. Sam felt an uneasy twist in his stomach. The woman's eyes, dark and filled with defiance, met his gaze, and for a moment he saw a flicker of something that told him she wasn't just some object to be bought and sold. She had a fire in her, even if it was hidden beneath the weight of captivity. "You sure about this, mister?" "Dalton," the settler asked, his voice low and gruff. "She's yours, no questions asked. A fine worker if you can get her to cooperate." Sam didn't reply immediately. He was too busy studying the woman's face, wondering what kind of life she had lived before being captured. She was Apache, he could tell from her features. Sam had heard about the Apache warriors, the fierce people who lived off the land and fought to protect it. He wasn't sure how he felt about owning someone from a people he had always heard of as enemies, but the reality of the deal settled in quickly. 2 pigs and a slave for a small sum of money, that was hard to pass up. It was a tough world out here. With a reluctant sigh, Sam handed over the money, his gaze still locked with the woman. She didn't say a word as the deal was sealed. The man handed Sam the reins to the woman's bonds, and Sam felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He didn't know why, but something about this deal didn't sit right with him. He wasn't a slave owner, and he didn't want to be one, but the world didn't offer him many choices. As he led the woman away from the market, Sam couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. What kind of life had she led before this? Had she been part of a raid? A warrior, perhaps? Or had she been taken for a different reason altogether? He didn't know, but he intended to find out. There was something in the way she carried herself that suggested there was more to her than just a captured slave. Her eyes spoke of a strength that he could only begin to understand. Sam took the long route home, avoiding the prying eyes of the townsfolk. The woman walked beside him, her steps slow but steady. She didn't seem to resist, but neither did she acknowledge him in any way. She simply followed, her face blank, her mind likely far away. When they arrived at the ranch, Sam tethered the woman to the post outside his small cabin. The pigs were settled in their pen, and Sam went about his chores, working around her, trying to ignore the awkwardness of the situation. He had never had a slave before, and he didn't quite know how to treat her. She wasn't like one of his horses or cattle. She was a person, a human being, and yet the reality of the deal hung over them both like a cloud. The woman said nothing that night. Sam offered her food, but she didn't take it. She sat quietly by the post, her back straight, her eyes fixed on some distant place in the darkness. Sam didn't push her. He understood that she must have been through a lot. The idea of forcing someone into labor seemed foreign to him, but in this harsh world it was just another part of survival. The days that followed were difficult. Sam tried to communicate with the woman, but she remained silent, only speaking when absolutely necessary. Her presence in the house was a constant reminder of the choices he had made. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with the arrangement, something deeply unsettling. He didn't like the idea of owning her, but he had no idea how to fix it. It wasn't like he could just send her back, not with the deal made. But then, one evening, something changed. Sam was finishing up his work in the barn when he saw the woman sitting by the well. She had taken off her ragged clothes and was kneeling, trying to clean herself with the little water she had. Her face was still streaked with dirt, but there was something about her posture, something strong and dignified, that caught his attention. He walked over to her, unsure of what to say. "Hey," he said gently, "you don't have to do that yourself." The woman looked up at him, her dark eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him pause. There was a brief moment of silence before she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I don't need your pity," she said, her tone sharp but not unkind. "But thank you." Sam was taken aback by the force of her words. He hadn't expected her to speak so openly, especially after everything that had happened. For a moment he didn't know what to say, but then an idea struck him. He didn't have much, but he could at least try to make her feel human again. He could try to show her some kindness. "You don't have to do it like that," he repeated, more gently this time. "I'll help you clean up. You deserve that much." And so, for the first time, Sam helped her wash the dirt off her skin. It was a simple act, but it felt like a turning point. As he scrubbed her face, the dirt fell away, revealing the true beauty beneath. Elena, he had learned her name by now, looked up at him, her eyes softening slightly. There was a long silence as Sam worked, both of them aware of the quiet tension between them. When the washing was done, Elena stood up, looking different somehow. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. The dirt was gone, and in its place was a woman who held herself with a quiet strength. Sam saw her then, truly saw her for the first time. Not as a slave, but as someone who had been through hardships he could never fully understand. Sam didn't know what to make of it. He didn't know if he could ever fully repay the damage done to her, but he made a silent promise to himself. He would try. It was the least he could do. The night passed quietly, but something had shifted. Sam knew it. Elena knew it. And despite the complexity of their situation, there was a glimmer of something new, something that might just change both of their lives forever. The days passed slowly on the ranch, each one blending into the next. Sam had never expected to find himself in this situation. Owning a slave, someone who had been taken from her people, forced into a life she hadn't chosen. But here she was, Elena, the Apache woman who had been swept into his world by an offer he had thought would only benefit him. But it was slowly dawning on Sam that Elena was more than just an object in the transaction. She was a person, someone with a life, a past, and a fire within her that refused to be snuffed out. The first few days after their quiet moment by the well had been awkward. Elena didn't speak much, still holding her distance from Sam. She took the food he offered, but her eyes never seemed to soften towards him. Sam understood. She had been through too much, and trust couldn't be given lightly. The idea of her being a slave in his home, someone he was responsible for, felt heavy on his conscience. He didn't know how to make it right, but he couldn't just ignore her. Something in him refused to let her feel like just another piece of property. Sam had always been a man of routine. Every morning, he would rise before the sun and head out to tend to the animals. He fed the pigs, checked on the cattle, and worked the land. It was a quiet life, one that didn't ask for much but gave even less in return. The work was hard, but it was honest. He was used to it. But now, with Elena on the ranch, things were different. Sam found himself wondering how he could make things better for her, but he didn't know where to start. The last thing he wanted was to force her into doing anything. but he knew that if she stayed here, she would need to contribute in some way. He just didn't know how to ask her. It wasn't long before Sam started noticing little things. Elena, for one, was surprisingly skilled at moving about the ranch. Though she hadn't spoken much, she didn't seem completely lost. She knew the difference between the livestock, and her eyes would often dart around, assessing the land as though she was taking it all in. Sam noticed that when he wasn't looking, she would sometimes pick up tools and start working on small tasks, like mending a fence or checking the water troughs for the cattle. He didn't ask her to do this, but she did it anyway. One afternoon, after a long morning of hard labor in the fields, Sam returned to the ranch to find Elena sitting outside by the well, her head tilted as she observed the horizon. The sun had begun to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a beautiful sight, one that Sam often enjoyed alone after a hard day's work. But today, for the first time, Elena was there, her dark eyes following the same sunset as him. Sam felt a strange pull towards her, a sense of curiosity mixed with something deeper he couldn't quite put into words. He had never been one to engage much with others. His life had always been solitary, filled with cattle, land, and the endless cycle of survival. But Elena was different. There was something about her that made him want to know her story, to learn about the life she had left behind, even though he had no right to ask. He walked over slowly, trying not to disturb the quiet. "You like to watch the sunset?" he asked, his voice soft. Elena didn't answer right away. She simply nodded, though her gaze didn't leave the horizon. The silence stretched between them, comfortable yet full of unspoken things. Sam didn't push her for more, he understood. Sometimes words weren't necessary. The next few days were filled with small changes. Elena began to take more initiative around the ranch without being asked. She helped Sam with the animals, fetched water from the well, and tended to the small garden Sam had started on the side of the cabin. She didn't say much, but Sam could see that she was slowly becoming part of the daily rhythm. It was as if she had found a small, quiet place for herself in this new life, despite the harshness of the world around her. One evening, as the cool night air settled over the ranch, Sam sat outside with a small fire crackling in front of him. He had become used to the sound of the fire popping and hissing, the occasional rustle of the wind in the trees. He looked up to find Elena standing a few feet away, watching him silently. She had been cleaning up the small barn where the pigs were kept, and her face was streaked with dust, but there was something different in her posture. She wasn't the woman he had first seen, broken and silent. She was stronger now, her back straighter, her eyes more alive. Sam gestured to the empty space next to him. "You want to sit for a bit?" Elena hesitated for a moment, then nodded and sat down on the ground near the fire. They were quiet for a long while, each of them staring into the flames, lost in their own thoughts. Sam was still unsure of how to approach her. She was no longer just a slave. She was part of the land now, a part of the daily flow of life on the ranch. And yet they were still strangers in many ways, each holding their own secrets and unspoken stories. Sam finally broke the silence. "You know you don't have to do all this. I never asked you to work. I just didn't want you to be stuck in the cabin all day." Elena's voice was quiet but steady. "I know, but it helps. It's not just about work I don't like feeling." Helpless, Sam nodded, understanding more than she knew. He had never felt completely helpless in his life, but he had often felt alone, even in the middle of a crowd. There was something about being busy, about keeping your hands working, that made the loneliness easier to bear. "I understand," Sam said. He paused for a moment, searching for the right words. "I don't know what you've been through, but I want you to know that you're not alone here. If you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here." Elena looked at him then, her dark eyes meeting his with a quiet intensity. For the first time since she had arrived, there was a small flicker of something in her gaze, maybe trust, maybe acceptance. Sam didn't push further. He knew it would take time. That trust wasn't something that could be given easily after what she had been through. The night passed in comfortable silence, and though neither of them said much, there was a new understanding between them. Elena, for the first time, felt as though she wasn't just a slave or an object. She was a person, someone who had a place in this world. It wasn't much, but it was something. Over the next few weeks, Sam continued his work on the ranch, and Elena continued to help. Slowly, the walls between them began to break down. They spoke more, though still carefully, each word weighed with the weight of their pasts. Elena didn't tell him everything about her life. how she had been taken from her family, how she had fought fiercely before being captured. But she began to share small pieces of herself, and Sam listened. He didn't ask for her past, but he felt a quiet respect for her strength, for the way she had carried herself even through her pain. One afternoon, as they worked together to fix a broken fence near the barn, Sam found himself watching Alina more than he should have. Her hands were skilled, her movements purposeful. There was no sign of the fear that had once clouded her expression. She was beginning to take pride in the work, in what she had helped build. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, Sam looked at her and smiled, a small, genuine smile. "You've got a good way of handling things around here." Alina met his gaze, her lips curling slightly in what might have been a smile. "I've had to learn," she replied. Sam nodded, knowing there was much more to her story than she let on, but respecting her space. The ranch, once a solitary place for him, now felt fuller, warmer with Alina by his side. He didn't know what the future held for them. He didn't know if they would ever be more than two people sharing a home, a piece of land, a difficult history. But for now, it was enough. They were alive together, building something new. And in that, there was hope. The days on the ranch began to feel less like work and more like a quiet routine that Sam and Alina shared together. Sam had never imagined how much companionship could change the pace of life. Alina, once distant and silent, had started to open up in small ways. She wasn't the same woman he had first met, broken and fearful. She was transforming, and Sam found himself noticing every small change. The first sign of this transformation came one morning when Sam was working with the livestock. The sun had barely risen, and the first light of day stretched across the land, casting long shadows over the fields. Sam was focused on a stubborn calf, trying to get it to move toward the barn when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Alina carrying a bucket of water. She hadn't asked him if he needed help. She simply saw that he was busy and had taken it upon herself to help with the morning chores. There was something almost natural about the way she moved, the way she handled the heavy bucket without hesitation. It wasn't the first time she had helped without being asked, but this morning felt different. She seemed more confident, more like she belonged here. It was as if she had become a part of the ranch, not just a worker, but a partner. "Need any help with that?" Alina asked, setting the bucket down beside him. Sam smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I think I've got it," he said, wiping his hands on his pants. "But I appreciate it." She nodded, her dark eyes meeting his briefly before she turned to the pigs, who had begun to squeal in the nearby pen. Sam watched her for a moment, her movements fluid and sure. Alina was becoming more than just a person on the ranch. She was starting to feel like someone who had a role here, someone who was no longer just surviving, but thriving. The next few weeks were filled with more small moments like this. Alina was no longer the woman who hid in the shadows, keeping her distance. She worked beside Sam every day, contributing to the ranch in ways Sam hadn't expected. She would gather firewood without being asked, help Sam fix fences, and even start a small garden of her own near the cabin. She grew vegetables and herbs that they both used in their meals. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Sam realize just how much Alina had to offer. She was resourceful, practical, and capable. In many ways, she was exactly what he needed to make the ranch thrive. One evening, after a long day of work, Sam sat down outside, looking out over the fields as the sun set behind the distant mountains. The air was cool, and the breeze carried the smell of fresh earth. He had always found comfort in these quiet moments. It was during these times that he allowed himself to reflect on the changes in his life, on how everything had shifted since Alina arrived. Sam didn't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way, he had begun to rely on her. Her presence had stopped feeling like an obligation, something he had to deal with. Instead, it had become natural, like the land itself. She was a part of it, a part of his daily life. It was no longer just about the deal that had brought her here. It was about the person she had become, strong, independent, and kind. He didn't realize how much he had come to appreciate her until one evening when the two of them were sitting together by the fire. The night was clear, and the stars shone brightly in the sky. Alina was sitting across from him, her face illuminated by the flickering light. For the first time, Sam noticed just how beautiful she had become. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was in the way she carried herself, in the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke. Alina was talking about her past, about the things she had lost when she was captured. She spoke slowly, her words measured, but there was a certain quiet strength in her voice that Sam hadn't heard before. She wasn't speaking with the bitterness of someone who had been broken. Instead, her voice was steady, as if she had accepted the past and was learning to move forward. "I never thought I would end up like this," Alina said, her gaze distant as she stared into the fire. "But sometimes you don't have a choice. You do what you must to survive." Sam nodded, understanding more than she knew. He had lived a life where survival was all that mattered. The world wasn't kind to those who weren't willing to fight for what they wanted. He hadn't grown up in the same circumstances as Alina, but in many ways their struggles were the same. Both of them had fought for their lives, one through physical battles, the other through emotional ones. "You're stronger than you think," Sam said quietly, his voice low but sincere. "I can see it. You've come a long way since I first brought you here." Alina looked up at him, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of surprise and something else, something softer. She had always carried herself with strength, but Sam could see now that she wasn't just surviving. She was living, and that in itself was a victory. The next morning, Sam woke to find that Alina had already started the day. She was outside, tending to the animals, and there was a quiet determination in the way she moved. Sam had gotten used to waking up early, but today, it felt different. There was an energy in the air that he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the work that needed to be done. It was the sense of possibility, the sense that something new was happening between them. As the weeks turned into months, Sam and Alina's relationship continued to evolve. There were no grand declarations or moments of dramatic change. Instead, it was a slow, steady building of trust and mutual respect. Sam had come to rely on Alina more than he had ever expected. She was no longer just the woman he had bought with 2 pigs. She was his equal, someone he worked alongside every day. She was the one who kept him going, who made the difficult days a little easier. And for the first time in his life, Sam didn't feel like he was alone on the ranch. One day, as they worked together to mend a broken fence, Sam turned to Alina and said something that had been on his mind for a while. "You know, I never imagined it would be like this," he said, his hands busy with the wire. "I didn't think we'd be working together. But here we are, and I'm grateful for it." Alina stopped what she was doing and looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. For a moment there was silence between them. It wasn't awkward silence. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from 2 people who have shared enough experiences to understand each other without words. "You don't have to thank me," Alina replied softly. "I'm here because I choose to be. This is my life now. And I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living." Those words hit Sam harder than he expected. Alina wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was thriving in her own way. And for the first time, Sam realized that he wasn't just helping her rebuild her life. She was helping him rebuild his own. He had spent so many years alone, believing that he didn't need anyone, that he could handle everything on his own. But Alina had shown him a different way. She had shown him that sometimes 2 people working together could create something stronger than either could do alone. As the months turned to winter, the ranch became a place of quiet contentment. The work was hard, but it was satisfying. Alina had become more than just someone Sam worked with. She was becoming a part of his life, his family. And Sam realized that, despite the circumstances that had brought them together, they had built something good. They had built a life. And for the first time, Sam didn't feel like he was alone. He had Alina. And that in itself was a quiet kind of miracle. The quiet, steady rhythm of life on the ranch continued as Sam and Alina worked side by side, each day blending into the next. It was a simple existence, but it was one they had both come to appreciate. The ranch was more than just a place for Sam now. It had become a home. And Alina, the woman who had arrived with nothing but a past filled with pain, was becoming more than just a worker. She was becoming a part of that home. It was on one of these ordinary days that everything began to change. One morning, the air was thick with tension. Sam had just finished his morning chores and was standing by the barn, checking the fences, when he noticed a group of riders approaching in the distance. They were moving quickly, their horses kicking up dust in the hot, dry air. Sam squinted, trying to make out who they were. As they got closer, his heart sank. They were Apache, and they were heading straight for the ranch. Sam's first instinct was to retreat to protect Alina from whatever might come. He knew the history, the raids, the violence, the endless conflict between settlers and the Apache. He didn't know why they had come, but he feared the worst. The last thing he wanted was for Alina to be caught in the middle of something that might tear apart the life they had built. He turned quickly, looking for Alina, but she was already standing behind him, having come out from the cabin when she heard the sound of hooves. "They're coming," Sam said, his voice low but urgent. Alina didn't flinch. Instead, she stood taller, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the approaching riders. "I know them," she said, her voice steady, as though she had expected this moment to come. "They're from my tribe." Sam looked at her, surprised by her calmness. Alina hadn't spoken much about her life before the ranch, but he knew enough to understand that she had been a warrior, a fighter. This wasn't just a simple group of Apache riders. These were her people. They had come for her. Before Sam could say anything, Alina took a step forward, her face set in a determined expression. "I have to go," she said softly but firmly. Sam felt his heart sink. He hadn't realized it until now, but the reality of the situation hit him hard. Alina had a past, one that Sam couldn't completely understand, but one that clearly still held a pull on her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choices, and those choices were no longer in Sam's hands. He walked toward her quickly, his heart racing. "Alina, don't go," he pleaded. "I don't want you to leave. I've come to care about you." Alina looked at him, her eyes softening for a moment. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, something almost tender, but it quickly faded as she glanced back at the riders who were getting closer. "I have to go," she repeated, her voice more resolute this time. "They are my family, my people. I have no choice." Sam could feel the weight of her words. He knew this was something that ran deeper than he could possibly understand. But as much as he wanted to keep her here, to keep her safe on the ranch, he knew that he couldn't stand in the way of her heritage. She had fought for her freedom, but her past was something that called to her, something that no ranch could replace. The riders finally arrived, pulling their horses to a stop in front of the cabin. Sam stood stiffly, trying to read their faces, but there was no warmth in their expressions. Alina stepped forward, her back straight and her head held high. Sam stood behind her, uncertain of what to do or say. One of the riders, an older man with weathered skin and a stern face, dismounted and approached Alina. "You've been away for too long," he said, his voice low and firm. "It's time to return to your people." Alina didn't flinch. "I have made my life here," she said. "This is where I belong now." The older man's expression softened just a little. "Your place is with us. We are your family. You cannot escape that, no matter how hard you try." Sam watched the exchange, his heart heavy with the realization that Alina's bond with her tribe was not something that could simply be erased. No matter how much they had grown together, how much they had built, her past was still part of her. He couldn't change that. The man turned to Sam, his eyes hard but not unkind. "We have no quarrel with you, settler," he said, his voice carrying a weight that Sam couldn't ignore. "But you must understand that she cannot stay here forever. She is needed among her people." Sam felt a knot form in his stomach. He didn't want to lose Alina, but he knew that this was her choice to make. He had never forced her into anything, and he wasn't about to start now. He simply nodded, stepping back and giving Alina the space she needed. "Go," Sam said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "Go if that's what you need." Alina looked at him for a long moment, her face unreadable. For the first time in months, there was a gap between them, a distance that neither of them knew how to bridge. But then Alina did something that took Sam completely by surprise. She stepped forward and touched his arm, her fingers brushing lightly against his skin. "I will never forget you," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "You gave me a life. You gave me a chance to be someone again. I will always carry that with me." Sam felt a wave of emotion wash over him, his heart swelling with an ache that he didn't know how to explain. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. All he could do was watch as Alina turned and walked toward the riders, her head held high, her back straight with pride. As the group of Apache riders turned and made their way back toward the hills, Sam stood in silence, watching Alina fade into the distance. He didn't know what the future would hold for either of them. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, or if the life they had built together would ever truly be more than a brief chapter in their lives. But Sam knew one thing for sure. Alina had been the one to show him that there was more to life than just surviving. She had opened his eyes to the possibility of something more, a deeper connection, a deeper meaning. And for that, Sam would always be grateful. The ranch was quiet once again, the dust swirling in the wind, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Alina had left a mark on him, one that would never fade. And though their paths had diverged, Sam knew that the story of their time together would stay with him forever. Days passed in a quiet haze for Sam after Alina left. The ranch seemed emptier, the land less welcoming. Sam didn't know what to do with himself. The work still needed to be done, but it felt different now. There was a heaviness in the air, an absence that he couldn't ignore. The animals still needed care, the crops still had to be tended, but there was a void in his heart that he couldn't fill. The early mornings were the hardest. Sam would wake up to the sound of the rooster crowing, the same way he always had, but now it felt like a reminder of the routine that had once been shared. He would step outside, feeling the crisp morning air on his skin, and he would catch himself looking toward the horizon, hoping, foolishly, that Alina might return. But the landscape remained unchanged, the distant hills as empty as his heart felt. Sam didn't speak much to anyone. The townsfolk knew of his situation, of Alina's departure, but they didn't ask. It wasn't the kind of thing people in town discussed openly. Instead, they gave Sam his space, letting him continue with his work as best as he could. But the quietness of the days weighed on him. He found himself wondering if he had done enough for Alina, if there was more he could have done to keep her from leaving. One morning, as Sam was tending to the animals, he heard the sound of hooves in the distance. It wasn't unusual for travelers or traders to pass through, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. His heart skipped a beat as the sound grew louder, and he turned toward the road, squinting against the sun. To his surprise, there was Alina, riding on horseback, her posture as proud as ever, but there was something new in her eyes. She was no longer the same woman who had arrived at the ranch months ago. This woman was different. She was more confident, more at ease with herself, and Sam could see that the journey she had taken, both physically and emotionally, had changed her. Sam's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure why she had come back, but he felt a surge of hope rush through him. Was this a second chance? A chance to rebuild what they had started? Or was it simply the end of their story, a chapter closed but never forgotten? Alina dismounted the horse as she reached the edge of the ranch, and Sam walked toward her slowly, unsure of what to say. They hadn't spoken since the day she had left, and he didn't know what to expect from this meeting. "I wasn't sure if I would see you again," Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. Alina smiled softly, her eyes filled with a warmth that Sam hadn't seen in a long time. "I wasn't sure either," she admitted, "but I've come to realize that some things are worth returning to." Sam's heart swelled with relief. She wasn't here to say goodbye, she had come back and that meant something, but he couldn't help but wonder why. Why now? Why after everything that had happened? "I've been thinking," Alina continued, her voice steady but filled with a quiet strength, "about my place in this world, about my people, and about you." She paused, looking around the ranch, her eyes taking in the familiar surroundings. "I've learned a lot since I left, but there's one thing I've learned most of all. I belong here with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sam felt a rush of emotions, relief, joy, and a sense of peace he hadn't felt in months. Alina had found her way back to him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. "I thought you would go back to your people," Sam said quietly, almost unsure if he had the right to ask such a question. "You seemed so certain about it when you left." Alina nodded slowly. "I was, but I've come to understand something important. Being with my people, being Apache, doesn't mean I have to forget who I've become. I've changed, Sam, and I think you've changed me. This land, this ranch, it's become a part of me too." Sam looked at her, searching her face for the truth of what she was saying. He had always known that Alina was strong, that she had a fire inside her that couldn't be easily extinguished. But this was something different. She wasn't just returning to him because it was the safe choice. She was returning because she had come to understand that her place, at least for now, was with him. "I don't know what the future holds," Alina continued, her voice soft but firm. "But I know that I want to be here with you, if you'll have me." Sam took a step toward her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no words, no grand speech to make, but he didn't need them. The way she had come back, the way she had chosen to be with him, spoke louder than any words could. And in that moment, Sam realized that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about living, truly living, together. "I've never asked you to stay," Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I've always wanted you here. I've never wanted you to leave." Alina smiled, and for the first time in months, Sam felt like everything might be okay. The past had been hard on both of them, but they had made it through. They had built something together, and that something was stronger than the past they both carried. The days that followed were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Alina didn't waste any time settling back into the rhythm of ranch life. She worked alongside Sam, her presence as natural as the land itself. She was no longer the woman who had arrived as a stranger, no longer a woman defined by her past. She had become part of Sam's world, part of the future they were building together. They spent their days working the land, tending to the animals, and fixing up the small cabin. Even the simplest tasks felt different now, filled with purpose, filled with a sense of belonging. Sam and Alina had found something together, something that had started as an unlikely bond but had grown into something deeper, something real. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, painting the sky with vibrant colors, Sam and Alina sat side by the fire. The crackling of the flames filled the quiet night, and the warmth of the fire made the cool evening air feel comfortable, almost peaceful. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them was no longer filled with tension. It was a silence that spoke of understanding, of shared experiences, and of a future that was uncertain but full of possibilities. "I'm glad you came back," Sam said, his voice low but sincere. Alina leaned her head against his shoulder, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I'm glad too," she replied, and for the first time in a long while, Sam felt the weight of the past lift. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. He had Alina by his side, and together they would face whatever came next. The ranch, once a solitary place, was now a home, a place where they had both found not just survival, but something worth living for. And as the stars appeared in the sky above them, Sam knew that their journey together was only just beginning.